The photographers kept shouting, "Brittany, over here. Turn around. Show us the back." Executives in tailored suits leaned in too close, eyes crawling over her like hands. A few wolves from rival packs stood near the velvet ropes, watching her with that look. The one that said they were deciding whether she was worth the trouble. And then Ray Coleman lost his mind. Before we begin with this story, I need you to do me a favor. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you watching from Toronto, Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago? Seriously, we love hearing from you. Your comment helps the growth of my channel. And if you're into werewolf romances with heat, heart, and a whole lot of tension, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Let's dive in. Brittany Hale had spent her entire life being told she wasn't enough. Not strong enough. Not wolf enough. Not worth enough. In the werewolf world, your wolf is everything. It's your identity, your strength, your place in the pack. When you shift for the first time, usually around puberty, it's supposed to be this explosive, transformative moment. Your wolf surges forward, claims you, makes you whole. Brittany's wolf never came. Oh, she could feel it. A faint presence in the back of her mind, like a voice on the other side of a locked door. Whispering, waiting, but never breaking through. The technical term was latent. A wolf that existed but refused, or couldn't, fully surface. In her father's pack, that made her less than nothing. Alpha Vincent Hale didn't tolerate weakness. He ruled the Hale pack with an iron fist and an ego the size of the Oregon coast. To him, Brittany wasn't a daughter. She was a stain on his reputation. A reminder that his bloodline wasn't as strong as he claimed. He never hit her. Didn't have to. Words did the job just fine. "You're lucky I even let you stay here, Brittany. Most packs would have cast you out by now. You should be grateful. The only thing you're good for now is making yourself useful. And if you can't do that, you're a burden." Every single day. She learned to smile through it. Learned to bury the hurt so deep it stopped showing on her face. Learned to be small, quiet, invisible. Until the day her father called her into his office and told her she was being mated off. Not asked, told. To Darius Cross, alpha of the Redwood Pack. Brittany had heard the stories about Darius. Everyone had. He was brutal, controlling, and had a taste for breaking the people closest to him. His last two mates had vanished under mysterious circumstances. One ended up in a hospital with injuries she refused to explain. The other was never seen again. And Vincent Hale didn't care. To him, it was an alliance. A way to secure territory and strengthen his position with the regional council. To Brittany, it was a death sentence. She sat in that office, hands clenched in her lap, nails digging into her palms hard enough to draw blood. "I'm not doing it." Her father's eyes went cold. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not mating Darius Cross." Vincent stood slowly, the air in the room thickening with dominance. "You don't get a choice." "Then kick me out." Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. "Because I'd rather be a rogue than let you sell me to that monster." For a moment, she thought he might actually throw her out. Part of her hoped he would. Instead, he smiled. "And that was worse. You have 2 weeks to change your mind. After that, the ceremony happens whether you show up or not." Brittany left that office knowing one thing with absolute certainty. She had to disappear. And fast. That's when she started hearing whispers about Ray Coleman. Ray Coleman was a ghost story in the werewolf world. Most alphas earned their title through lineage, politics, or carefully orchestrated challenges. Ray earned his by killing his father at 14 years old. The details were brutal. Vicious. The kind of thing people didn't talk about in polite company. Alpha Donovan Coleman had been a nightmare. Abusive, tyrannical, a sadist who believed fear was the only way to maintain control. He'd beaten Ray since childhood, trying to toughen him up, make him ruthless, turn him into a weapon. It worked, just not the way Donovan expected. One night, Ray snapped. Challenged his father in front of the entire pack. shifted mid-fight and tore him apart with his bare hands. Well, claws. He was 14. And he'd been alpha ever since. The Phoenix pack wasn't large. Maybe 30 wolves, most of them misfits and outcasts who had nowhere else to go. But what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in loyalty. Because Ray didn't rule through fear. He ruled through respect. Still, the reputation stuck. People called him feral, dangerous, a ticking time bomb wrapped in tattoos and a permanent scowl. And now, 10 years later, Ray had a different problem. His uncle, Garrett Coleman, wanted the pack, wanted the power. And he was using every political trick in the book to make Ray look unstable. A lone alpha with no mate is a liability, Garrett had said in front of the regional council. He's unpredictable, violent, unfit to lead. It was a setup, a slow-motion coup disguised as concern for the pack's well-being. Ray knew it. His beta, Callum, knew it. Hell, half the council probably knew it. But knowing didn't change the optics. If Ray didn't find a way to look stable, united, Garrett would challenge him. And if Ray lost, the Phoenix pack would be torn apart from the inside out. He needed a mate, not a real one. He didn't have time for that kind of vulnerability, but someone who could stand beside him at council meetings, smile for the cameras, and make Garrett back the hell off. Someone temporary. Someone desperate enough to agree. And then Brittany Hale walked into his office. The Phoenix pack compound sat on the outskirts of Portland, tucked between industrial warehouses and stretches of wild forest. It wasn't pretty. No manicured lawns or elegant stone buildings. Just functional. Raw. A place built for survival, not appearances. Brittany's hands were shaking when she knocked on the front door. A wolf answered, tall, broad-shouldered, with a southern accent and an easygoing grin that didn't quite mask the sharpness in his eyes. You lost. I'm here to see Ray Coleman. The wolf's grin faded. He expecting you? No. But he'll want to hear what I have to say. The wolf studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Follow me. Ray's office was upstairs. Sparse. A steel desk, a couple of chairs, and walls lined with maps of pack territories. No personal photos. Just the bare minimum. Ray himself was sitting behind the desk, arms crossed, eyes locked on her the second she walked in. He didn't say anything. Just waited. Brittany's heart was pounding so loud, she was sure he could hear it. But she forced herself to stand tall, meet his gaze, and speak. I need you to fake-mate me for 3 months. Silence. Ray's expression didn't change. He just stared at her like she'd lost her mind. 60 seconds, he said finally. Talk. She took a breath. Laid it all out. Her father. Darius Cross. The forced mating. The fact that she was latent, worthless in her pack's eyes, and running out of time. You need to look stable for the council, she finished. I need to disappear from my father's radar. We help each other. 3 months. Then we walk away. Ray leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. You think I'm dumb enough to tie myself to a latent wolf from the Hale pack? Your father would love an excuse to come after me. My father doesn't care about me, Brittany shot back. And you don't have to like me. You just have to stand next to me and look possessive. That's it. Another beat of silence. Then Ray leaned forward, elbows on the desk, gaze drilling into hers. 3 months. You follow my rules. You don't embarrass my pack. And if you try to double-cross me, latent or not, I'll make sure you regret it. Brittany should have been terrified. This man had killed his own father. He was dangerous, volatile, everything the rumors said. But instead, she smiled. Deal. The mating ceremony happened that same night. There was no ceremony, really. No flowers, no witnesses beyond Callum, no romantic speeches. Just Ray, Brittany, and a single bite that would bind them together for the next 3 months. They stood in a dimly lit room at the back of the pack house. Brittany's pulse was racing. Her wolf, silent for so long, was stirring, restless. Ray stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. This is temporary, he said, voice low. Don't forget that. Wouldn't dream of it, Brittany whispered. His eyes glowed amber. predatory, ancient. And then his teeth sank into the curve of her neck. The pain was sharp, immediate, burning through her like wildfire. But beneath it was something else. Something electric. The bond snapped into place. And for the first time in Brittany's life, her wolf roared. Not in pain, in recognition. Ray froze. His hand tightened on her waist, claws pricking through the fabric of her shirt. What the hell was that? Brittany gasped. He pulled back, eyes wild, pupils blown wide. I don't know. But they both felt it. The bond wasn't fake. Their wolves knew something they didn't. And everything just got a hell of a lot more complicated. Chapter 2. The next morning, Brittany moved into the Phoenix Pack compound with a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder and a head full of questions she was too smart to ask out loud. The bite mark on her neck throbbed with every heartbeat, a constant, burning reminder that something had shifted last night. Something neither of them understood. The bond was supposed to be fake, a performance for the council and her father and anyone else who needed convincing. But her wolf had woken up. After 23 years of silence, her wolf had screamed when Ray's teeth sank into her skin. And now that presence in the back of her mind wasn't a whisper anymore. It was awake, restless, hungry for something Brittany didn't have a name for yet. She shoved the feeling down and focused on unpacking. The room Ray assigned her was small but functional, a bed, a dresser, a window overlooking the training yard.
No frills. No personal touches.
It felt temporary, which was exactly what this arrangement was supposed to be. 3 months. That's what they'd agreed on. Then she could disappear, start fresh somewhere far away from her father and Darius Cross and all the people who'd spent her entire life telling her she wasn't enough. But first, she had to survive living under the same roof as Ray Coleman. The pack house itself was nothing like the Hale territory. No marble floors or expensive artwork. It was industrial, raw, exposed beams, concrete floors, walls that looked like they'd been patched more than once. Functional, built for wolves who needed shelter, not status. And the pack members? They were just as rough around the edges as the building. Brittany met them one by one over breakfast in the communal kitchen, a massive space with long wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the smell of coffee so strong it could wake the dead. First was Callum Pierce, Ray's beta. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy blonde hair and an accent that screamed Louisiana. He leaned against the counter with a mug of coffee in one hand and a grin that was equal parts charming and dangerous. The second Brittany walked in, his eyes lit up. Well, I'll be damned. So you're the one who got Ray to actually smile. Brittany blinked. I didn't. Oh, you did. Trust me. I've known that man for 8 years, and I've seen him smile, maybe twice. Once when we took down a rogue pack threatening our border, and once last night after you left his office. Callum's grin widened. Didn't think I'd see the day. Brittany felt heat creep up her neck. It's not like that. It's temporary. Callum just laughed and took a long sip of his coffee. Sure it is, darling. Sure it is. Before she could argue, a voice cut through the room like a whip. Callum, stop flirting with the new girl before Ray rips your head off. Brittany turned to see a petite woman with straight black hair streaked with vibrant purple, sharp brown eyes, and an expression that said she'd seen too much and had zero patience left for nonsense. Ivan Gwynn, the woman said, extending a hand. Pack healer. Also your new roommate, apparently, since Ray's too emotionally constipated to let you stay in his room like a normal, mated pair. Brittany shook her hand, caught off guard by the bluntness. Nice to meet you? Ivy smirked. You'll get used to me. Word of advice, if Ray starts growling at you, just throw something at his head. Works every time. Does it? Nope. But it's funny as hell to watch him flinch. Brittany couldn't help it, she laughed. A real laugh, the kind that felt foreign after years of swallowing everything down. The third wolf she met was quieter. Malik Torres sat at the far end of the table, nursing a cup of black coffee and watching Brittany with the kind of intensity that made her skin prickle. He was tall, lean, with dark hair pulled back in a knot and eyes that missed nothing. Head of security, Callum had said.
Former military.
Didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. Malik didn't introduce himself. Just nodded once in acknowledgement, his gaze lingering on her like he was cataloging every detail. Threat assessment, weaknesses, whether she was worth the trouble. Brittany held his stare, refusing to look away first. After a long moment, Malik's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Then he went back to his coffee. Don't take it personally, Ivy said, sliding into the seat beside Brittany with a plate of scrambled eggs. Malik doesn't trust anyone. Took him 6 months to stop side-eyeing me, and I'm the one who patched him up after he got his ribs cracked in a border skirmish. How long until he trusts me? Brittany asked. Ivy grinned. Depends. You planning on sticking around longer than 3 months? Brittany's throat tightened. It's temporary. Ivy's grin faded into something softer.
Yeah.
That's what they all say. The rest of breakfast passed in a blur of introductions, overlapping conversations, and an ease Brittany hadn't felt in years. These wolves weren't perfect. They were sarcastic, rough, fiercely loyal to each other in a way that had nothing to do with rank or bloodlines. They were a family, and for the first time in her life, Brittany didn't feel judged for being latent. Didn't feel like she had to shrink herself to fit into someone else's expectations. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could belong here. But Ray? Ray was a different story. Ray Coleman was avoiding her. Not obviously. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But Brittany noticed. At packed dinners, he sat beside her. Close enough that their arms brushed, close enough that anyone watching would see the bond and believe it. He'd lean in occasionally, murmur something that looked intimate from a distance but was usually just logistics. Council meeting Thursday. We'll need to be there. He played the part perfectly. But the second they were alone, he disappeared. Into his office. Into the training yard. Into whatever dark corner of the compound he could find where she wasn't. It should have been a relief. This was supposed to be fake, after all. Professional. A mutually beneficial arrangement with a clear expiration date. So, why did it feel like rejection? Brittany told herself she didn't care. Told herself it was easier this way, cleaner, less complicated. But her wolf disagreed. That newly awakened presence in the back of her mind was furious, restless. Constantly pushing at the edges of her control, demanding she go find him, confront him, make him acknowledge what had happened between them. Brittany ignored it. Buried herself in helping Ivy at the clinic, learning the pack's routines, keeping busy enough that she didn't have time to think about the alpha who'd bitten her, and then walked away. But ignoring it only worked for so long. A week into her stay, Brittany found herself alone in the communal kitchen at 2 a.m, nursing a cup of chamomile tea and trying not to think about the fact that Ray's room was directly above hers and she could feel him through the bond, awake, restless, pacing like a caged animal. She was so lost in her own head that she didn't hear him come in until he spoke. Couldn't sleep? Brittany jumped, tea sloshing over the rim of her mug. She spun around to find Ray standing in the doorway, barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a black t-shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the muscle underneath. His hair was a mess. His eyes were tired. And for once, the walls he kept so carefully in place looked like they were cracking. You're avoiding me, Brittany said before she could stop herself. Ray's jaw tightened.
I'm Busse.
Liar. His eyes flashed amber. What do you want me to say, Brittany? The truth would be nice. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his skin, smell the faint scent of cedar and smoke that clung to him. You want the truth? His voice was low, rough, dangerous.
Fine.
The bond feels real. My wolf won't shut up about you. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to keep you close, to protect you, He stopped, jaw clenching. This wasn't supposed to happen. Brittany's heart was hammering. I know. So, what are we going to do about it? She didn't have an answer. Didn't trust herself to speak without her voice shaking. Ray stared at her for a long moment, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. Then he turned and walked out, leaving Brittany alone in the kitchen with a cold cup of tea and a bond that burned hotter every day. 2 weeks into the arrangement, everything changed. Brittany was in the training yard with Ivy, learning basic self-defense moves because, latent or not, Ivy had insisted she needed to know how to throw a punch when the perimeter alarm sounded. 3 short bursts. Intruder. The entire pack went on high alert. Malik was moving before the 3rd alarm finished, barking orders into a radio. Callum appeared from the main building, already shifting his weight into a fighter's stance. And Ray? Ray was a storm. He strode out of the pack house, eyes glowing amber, dominance rolling off him in waves so thick it made the air heavy. "Who is it?" he demanded. Malik's voice was clipped. "Darius Cross. For wolves with him. No weapons visible, but they're standing right at the border." Brittany's blood went cold. Ray's eyes snapped to her, something fierce and protective flashing across his face before he locked it down. "Stay here. Ray. Stay. Here." Then he was gone, moving toward the border with Callum and Malik flanking him. Ivy grabbed Brittany's arm. "Come on. If this goes south, I need you in the clinic." But Brittany couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because Darius Cross was here, on Phoenix Pack territory. And she knew, this wasn't a social call. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Brittany followed Ray. She stayed back, concealed in the tree-line, but close enough to see. Darius stood at the edge of Phoenix territory with 4 of his wolves spread out behind him. He was tall, broad, with rust-colored hair and a smile that made Brittany's skin crawl. He looked relaxed, amused, like this was all a game. "Coleman," Darius drawled, hands in his pockets. "Heard you claimed Brittany Hale. Funny. I was under the impression she was mine." Ray's entire body went rigid. His voice dropped to a growl that made the wolves behind Darius shift nervously. "She was never yours." Darius's smile widened. "Then prove it." Brittany's heart stopped. Before she could process what was happening, Ray moved. Not to attack.
To claim.
His hand wrapped around her waist, because somehow he'd known she was there, known she wouldn't stay behind, and pulled her flush against his side. His grip was possessive, protective, unshakable, and when he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Touch her, look at her, even think about her, and I'll rip your throat out." The air crackled with dominance. Pure, undiluted alpha power that made every wolf in the clearing, including Brittany, want to drop to their knees. Darius's wolves took a step back. Even Darius's smile faltered. But then he laughed, sharp, humorless, dangerous. "This isn't over, Coleman." "Yeah," Ray said softly. "It is." Darius held his gaze for another beat, then turned and walked away, his wolves trailing behind him like shadows. The second they were gone, Ray's grip on Brittany tightened. "Inside.
Now."
Okay, real talk for a second. If you've made it this far and you haven't hit subscribe yet, I genuinely need to know, why not? We're out here pouring everything into these stories, bringing you the heat, the tension, the wolves you can't stop thinking about, and it's completely free. All we're asking is for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment below and tell us what country you're watching from. Seriously, we love hearing from our global pack. Let's keep this community growing. That night, Brittany couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment at the border. The way Ray had pulled her against him, without hesitation. The way his voice had dropped into something lethal and protective and utterly final. She was never yours. Her wolf was practically vibrating with satisfaction.
But Brittany?
Brittany was terrified. Because that hadn't been an act. That had been real. She found Ray on the back porch an hour past midnight, sitting on the steps with his elbows on his knees, staring out at the dark stretch of forest beyond the compound. He didn't turn when she sat down beside him, but his body shifted, just slightly, acknowledging her presence. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Brittany nodded, even though her hands were still shaking. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," Ray said, voice rough. "I did. Silence settled between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Finally, Ray exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. Brittany, he stopped.
Started again.
This bond. It's messing with my head. Mine too, Brittany admitted. He turned to look at her then, and the vulnerability in his amber eyes stole her breath. I don't do relationships, he said quietly. I'm not good at this. At letting people in. At trusting that they won't. He stopped again, jaw clenching. Brittany's chest tightened.
Won't what?
Leave, he said finally. Or worse. She understood. His father. The abuse. The scars, physical and otherwise, that he carried like armor. Good thing this is fake, then, Brittany said softly, trying to lighten the weight pressing down on both of them. Ray's eyes darkened. Doesn't feel fake. Brittany's breath caught. And then he kissed her.
Slow. Deep. Devastating.
His hand cupped the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair. His mouth moved against hers like he was memorizing the taste, the shape, the way she fit against him. Brittany's wolf roared in approval, and for once, she didn't fight it. She kissed him back with everything she had, all the fear, the confusion, the desire she'd been trying so hard to bury. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Ray rested his forehead against hers. We're in trouble, he whispered. Brittany laughed, shaky, breathless, utterly wrecked.
Yeah.
We really are. Chapter 3. After that kiss on the back porch, something fundamental shifted between them. Ray stopped running. He stopped disappearing into his office the moment they were alone. Stopped treating Brittany like a temporary inconvenience he had to tolerate for 3 months. Stopped pretending the bond didn't exist. Instead, he started showing up. Morning coffee became a ritual. Brittany would stumble into the kitchen at 6 a.m., half awake and craving caffeine, and Ray would already be there, leaning against the counter with 2 mugs waiting. One black for him, one with cream and sugar for her, exactly the way she liked it even though she'd never told him. He just knew. They didn't talk much during those early morning moments. Just existed in the same space, comfortable in the silence, shoulders brushing as they watched the sun rise through the kitchen window. It was domestic, intimate, terrifying, and Brittany couldn't get enough of it. The late-night conversations started next. Ray would find her in the common room after packed dinners, reading or sketching in a journal she'd picked up in town. He'd sit beside her without asking, close enough that their knees touched, and they'd talk. About everything. About nothing. He told her about the Phoenix Pack's history, how most of the wolves here were outcasts, rejects from other territories who had nowhere else to go. How he'd built this place into something that felt like family, even when he didn't quite know how to be part of one himself. Brittany told him about growing up in the Hale Pack, about the suffocating weight of her father's expectations and the shame that came with being latent, about learning to make herself small, invisible, unremarkable, so she wouldn't be a target. Ray listened like every word mattered, like she mattered. And then came the training sessions. Ray insisted on teaching her self-defense. Latent or not, you're going to know how to protect yourself, he'd said, brooking no argument. So 3 times a week, Brittany found herself in the training yard with Ray, learning how to throw a punch, how to break a hold, how to use her size and speed to her advantage. He was patient, encouraging, but he didn't go easy on her. Again, he'd say after she failed to land a hit. You're hesitating. Stop thinking and move. Brittany would reset, frustration burning in her chest, and try again, and again, and again, until finally, she swept his leg and sent him crashing to the mat. The entire training yard went silent. Ray looked up at her from the ground, eyes wide with surprise, and then he laughed. A real, full-bodied laugh that made Brittany's heart stutter. There it is, he said, grinning. Knew you had it in you. Brittany couldn't help but smile back, breathless and exhilarated and feeling more alive than she had in years. The pack noticed the change. Callum started making bets on how long it would take before Ray officially claimed Brittany as his true mate. Malik watched them with something that almost looked like approval. And Ivy? Ivy cornered Brittany in the kitchen one afternoon, arms crossed, grin sharp as a blade. "So," Ivy said, leaning against the counter, "when's the wedding? The real one?" Brittany nearly dropped the mug she was washing.
What? No.
"It's still fake." Ivy snorted, a sound so loud and disbelieving it echoed off the walls. "Girl, please. The way that man looks at you? That's not fake. It'll burn the world down for you real." "It's temporary," Brittany insisted, even though her voice lacked conviction. 3 months. That was the deal. Ivy's grin softened into something gentler, more knowing. "Honey, that deal died the second he bit you. You two just haven't admitted it yet." Brittany didn't have a response to that, because deep down, she knew Ivy was right. The night Brittany saw Ray's scars was the night everything changed again. It had been a brutal training session, Ray pushing the pack hard, running combat drills until everyone was exhausted and soaked in sweat. Brittany had watched from the sidelines, fascinated by the way he moved, the way he commanded respect without raising his voice. Afterward, she went looking for him. She found him in the garage, sitting on the concrete floor beside his motorcycle, tools spread out around him. His shirt was off, draped over a nearby workbench, and his hands were streaked with grease and blood from scraped knuckles. But it was his back that made Brittany's breath catch.
Scars. Dozens of them.
Old, jagged lines crisscrossing his skin like a road map of pain. Some were thin, surgical. Others were thick, brutal, the kind that came from claws or belts or worse. Brittany's stomach twisted. "Your father did that to you." It wasn't a question. Ray didn't turn around, didn't flinch. His hands kept working on the motorcycle engine, steady and mechanical.
"Yeah."
Brittany stepped closer, her voice soft. "How old were you?" Ray's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Started when I was 7. Ended when I was 14.
His voice was flat, detached.
Like he was talking about someone else's life, not his own. He wanted to toughen me up, make me ruthless, turn me into the kind of alpha who ruled through fear. Ray's hands stilled on the wrench he was holding. He got what he wanted. "No," Brittany said firmly. "He didn't." Ray finally turned to look at her, eyes guarded, walls snapping back into place. "How do you know?" Brittany sat down beside him on the cold concrete floor, close, but not touching. "Because you protect people. He destroyed them." Ray stared at her, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. "I killed him, Brittany. I tore him apart with my bare hands when I was 14 years old. How is that any different?" "Because he was hurting you," Brittany said quietly. "And you stopped him. That's not destruction. That's survival." Ray looked away, throat working like he was swallowing something sharp. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just like him. If I'm one bad day away from turning into the same monster." Brittany reached out and took his hand, grease-stained, bloodied, trembling, and held it between both of hers. "You're not him," she said, voice steady and sure. "You won't become him. I won't let you." Ray's eyes snapped back to hers, wide and startled, like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. And then he pulled her into his arms, held her tight, face buried in her hair, breathing like he'd been drowning and she was air. Brittany wrapped her arms around him and held on just as fiercely, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body. They stayed like that for a long time, tangled together on the garage floor, surrounded by motorcycle parts and the faint smell of oil and metal. And for the first time since she'd arrived at the Phoenix Pack, Brittany realized something terrifying. She was falling in love with him. A few days later, everything Brittany thought she knew about herself shattered. She was helping Ivy in the clinic, a small, well-stocked room on the first floor of the pack house where Ivy treated everything from training injuries to the occasional rogue attack aftermath. A young wolf named Devin stumbled in, clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. "Caught a claw during sparring," he gasped, face pale. Malik said it wasn't deep, but... Ivy took one look at the wound and cursed. "That's deeper than it looks. I need to stitch it, but I'm out of antiseptic." Damn supply shipment was supposed to come yesterday. She grabbed her phone, already dialing. I'll call Dr. Brennan from Riverbend Pack. He can be here in 20 minutes. Wait, Brittany said. The word came out before she could think about it. Before she could second-guess herself. Ivy paused, phone halfway to her ear. Wait for what? Brittany didn't have an answer. Just instinct. A pull deep in her chest, in the place where her wolf had been silent for so long. Let me try something. Ivy's eyes narrowed. Try what? Brittany stepped closer to Devon, hands shaking slightly as she reached out. I don't know. Just trust me. Ivy hesitated, then nodded.
Okay.
But if this doesn't work, I'm calling Brennan. Brittany placed her hands over Devon's wound, closing her eyes and focusing on that pull in her chest. For a moment, nothing happened. And then her wolf answered. It wasn't a shift, wasn't a voice. Just a surge of warmth, of power, of something ancient and instinctive flooding through her veins and down into her palms. Golden light pulsed from her hands, soft at first, then brighter, brighter, until it filled the entire room. Devon gasped. Ivy swore. And the wound knit itself back together in seconds. Flesh mending, blood drying, skin smooth and unmarked like the injury had never existed. Brittany pulled her hands back, staring at them in shock. The golden light faded, but she could still feel it humming beneath her skin, warm and alive and hers. Devon touched his side, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Ivy stepped closer, mouth hanging open. Brittany, you're not latent. Brittany looked up, heart pounding. What? You're a healer. Ivy's voice was filled with awe. A silver healer. One of the rarest types of wolf in existence. The room spun. All her life, Brittany had been told her wolf was broken, defective. That she was less than everyone else because she couldn't shift, couldn't hunt, couldn't fight. But her wolf wasn't broken.
She was specialized. Rare.
Powerful. And her father had spent 23 years making her believe she was worthless. The realization hit her like a freight train. All the shame, the self-doubt, the years of shrinking herself to fit into a box that was never meant for her, it had all been a lie. Tears burned her eyes. Her hands were still shaking. Devon left the clinic with wide eyes and whispered thanks, and Ivy pulled Brittany into a fierce hug. You are not broken, Ivy said firmly. You hear me? You never were. Brittany nodded, throat too tight to speak. When she finally pulled herself together, she went looking for Ray. She found him in his office, bent over a stack of territory reports. The second he saw her face, he was on his feet. What happened? Brittany didn't say anything. Just walked into his arms and buried her face in his chest. Ray held her without asking questions, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. I'm a healer, Brittany whispered against his shirt. Ray went still. What? My wolf. She's not latent. She's a silver healer. Brittany pulled back enough to look up at him, tears streaming down her face. My father spent my whole life telling me I was broken, and I believed him. Ray's eyes blazed with fury. Not at her, but for her. He's a goddamn liar. I know that now. Ray cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. You are the strongest person I've ever met, and I'm sorry it took you this long to see it. Brittany kissed him then, desperate, grateful, overwhelmed. And Ray kissed her back like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. A month into their arrangement, Ray received an invitation to a charity movie premiere in downtown Portland. It was a massive event. Hollywood actors, local celebrities, pack alphas from across the West Coast all gathered for a night of networking, politics, and public appearances. Ray didn't want to go. Hated these kinds of events. But Garrett had been making noise at the last council meeting, questioning Ray's stability again, and showing up with Brittany would shut him up. At least temporarily. It's a good opportunity to show the bond publicly, Ray said, handing Brittany the embossed invitation. Brittany studied it, then looked up at him. You want me to come as your date? I want you to come as my mate. The distinction mattered. She could see it in his eyes.
So Brittany said yes.
She spent 3 days finding the perfect dress, something that made her feel confident, powerful, beautiful. She settled on a pink dress, fitted and elegant, with a neckline that showed just enough skin to make her feel daring. The night of the premiere, she stood in front of the mirror in her room, hands smoothing down the fabric, heart hammering. Ivy whistled from the doorway.
Damn, girl.
Ray's gonna lose his mind. Brittany laughed nervously. That's the plan. When she walked downstairs, Ray was waiting in the main hall. He looked devastating in a black suit, hair styled, tattoos peeking out from beneath his collar. But the second he saw her, everything else in the room faded. His eyes went molten gold. You look. He trailed off, throat working. Good. Brittany offered, smiling. Perfect. They arrived at the premiere an hour later, stepping out of Ray's truck into a sea of camera flashes and shouting photographers. Brittany's confidence wavered the second her heels hit the red carpet. There were so many people. So many eyes. Photographers screaming her name, rival pack alphas watching from the sidelines, human executives leering like she was something they could purchase. Her skin crawled. Ray's hand found the small of her back immediately, grounding her. Breathe, he murmured. I've got you. They started walking, cameras flashing in blinding bursts. And then a photographer yelled, Brittany, turn around. Show us the back of the dress. Before Brittany could even process the request, Ray moved. His black coat was around her shoulders in seconds, heavy and warm and smelling like him. His body blocked the cameras, his arm locked around her waist like a steel band, and his voice low, possessive, feral, cut through the chaos like a blade. No one sees this but me. The cameras went wild, flashes exploding, voices shouting, the entire red carpet descending into chaos. But all Brittany could focus on was Ray, staring down at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. You look beautiful, he murmured, hand cupping her cheek. And you're mine. Not fake.
Real.
Brittany's breath caught. Ray. He kissed her then, right there on the red carpet in front of everyone. And Brittany kissed him back, feeling the bond between them flare brighter than any camera flash. When they finally pulled apart, the world was still spinning. But for the first time in her life, Brittany didn't care who was watching. She was Ray Coleman's mate, and she was done pretending otherwise. Chapter 4. 2 days after the movie premiere, everything fell apart. Brittany was in the kitchen with Ivy, laughing over burned pancakes and terrible coffee, when the front door of the pack house slammed open hard enough to rattle the windows. The laughter died instantly. Callum appeared in the doorway, face grim, shoulders tight. Main hall.
Now.
Garrett's here. Brittany's blood turned to ice. Garrett Coleman, Ray's uncle. The man who'd been circling the Phoenix pack like a vulture for months, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Ivy grabbed Brittany's hand and squeezed. Stay close to me. They moved through the pack house together, joining the stream of wolves converging on the main hall, a massive open space with exposed beams and concrete floors, built for pack meetings and challenges. The entire pack was already there. 30 wolves standing in a loose circle, faces tense, eyes locked on the man standing in the center of the room. Garrett Coleman looked like an older, crueler version of Ray. Same height, same build, same dark hair, though Garrett's was streaked with silver at the temples. But where Ray's eyes held warmth beneath the ice, Garrett's were empty. Cold. Calculating. He stood with 4 wolves flanking him, enforcers from his own pack, muscle brought to make a point. And Ray stood across from him, arms crossed, body coiled like a spring ready to snap. The air between them crackled with dominance. 2 alphas in the same room, neither willing to submit. Brittany's wolf stirred restlessly, sensing the threat. Garrett smiled when he saw her, sharp, predatory, knowing.
Ah.
The mate. His voice was smooth, cultured, dripping with false warmth. I was hoping to meet you, Brittany. My nephew's been keeping you well hidden. Get to the point, Garrett, Ray said, voice like gravel. Garrett's smile widened. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and held it up for everyone to see. I'm here to issue a formal challenge. The room went deathly silent. Malik swore under his breath. Callum's hands clenched into fists. Ivy's grip on Brittany's hand tightened painfully. Ray didn't move, didn't react, just stared at his uncle with cold, lethal focus. You want my pack? Ray's voice was soft. Dangerous. Come take it. Garrett laughed, a sound that made Brittany's skin crawl. Oh, I will. But not today. He unfolded the document and began reading aloud, voice carrying through the hall like a judge delivering a sentence. According to regional pack law, an alpha who cannot maintain a stable bond is unfit to lead. You've been unmated for 10 years, Ray. 10 years of instability, recklessness, and isolation. The council has given me the authority to challenge your leadership on grounds of incompetence. I'm mated now, Ray said flatly. Garrett's smile turned vicious. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a political stunt. A desperate attempt to hold onto power you're not qualified to wield. He turned to address the pack, voice rising theatrically. We all saw the photos from the premiere. Very convincing. But a real bond? A true mating? That requires more than pretty pictures and possessive displays. It requires stability, unity, trust. His eyes flicked back to Ray. All things you've never been capable of. Brittany felt Ray's fury through the bond, a white-hot blaze of rage barely contained beneath his skin. But he didn't explode, didn't attack, just stood there, radiating deadly calm. You're wasting everyone's time, Garrett. Am I? Garrett tilted his head, still smiling. Then prove it. Prove the bond is real. Prove you're stable, united, capable of leading this pack into the future. He paused for effect. You have 1 month. If you can't convince the council that your mating is genuine, I'll challenge you for alpha rights. And we both know how that ends. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Ray's eyes glowed amber. Get out of my territory. Garrett folded the document carefully, tucking it back into his jacket. 1 month, nephew. Don't waste it. He turned and walked out, his enforcers trailing behind him like shadows. The second the door closed, the pack erupted into chaos. Voices overlapping, wolves arguing, fear and anger rippling through the room like wildfire. But Brittany only had eyes for Ray. He stood frozen in the center of the hall, jaw clenched, fists trembling at his sides. And then he turned and walked out without a word. Brittany found him an hour later on the roof of the pack house. It was one of Ray's favorite places. A flat section of industrial roofing with a view of the city lights sprawling across the valley below. Quiet, isolated, a place to think. He was sitting on the edge, legs dangling over the side, shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the world. Brittany climbed up carefully, her heels scraping against the metal ladder, and sat down beside him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The city stretched out below them, lights twinkling like stars, the distant hum of traffic a constant backdrop. The air was cold, sharp with the promise of rain. Finally, Ray broke the silence. He's going to challenge me. His voice was flat, resigned. Brittany turned to look at him, heart clenching. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Ray exhaled slowly, breath misting in the cold air. Garrett's been planning this for months. Probably longer. He's been laying the groundwork with the council, planting seeds of doubt, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then we'll prove him wrong. Ray's laugh was bitter.
How?
By pretending harder? By putting on a better show? It's not pretending anymore, Brittany said quietly. Ray went still. She could feel his eyes on her, sharp and searching, but she kept her gaze fixed on the city below. Ray, this bond, it stopped being fake for me weeks ago. The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable and terrifying. Ray turned to face her fully, eyes wide, pupils blown. You mean that?
Yeah.
Brittany's voice shook.
Ido.
He cupped the back of her neck and kissed her, desperate, claiming real. I don't deserve you. Shut up, Brittany whispered. You do. And I'm not going anywhere. Then we fight. Together.
Together.
The next morning, Ray called an emergency meeting with his inner circle. Brittany sat beside him at the head of the table, fingers laced with his beneath the surface. Garrett's playing the long game, Ray said. He's going to spend the next month digging for anything he can use against us. Proof the bond is fake, Callum said. Evidence Ray's unstable. Ray's eyes glowed amber. Then I fight. And I don't lose. That night, Brittany couldn't sleep. She found Ray on the roof again. I'm terrified, he admitted. She cupped his face. You are enough. I love you. I love you too. Brittany's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Enjoying your fake mate? Shame he'll be dead in 3 days. See you at the challenge, little wolf. Darius. Attached was a photo. Garrett Coleman and Darius Cross. Shaking hands. Ray's eyes went molten gold. They're going to kill you. This isn't politics anymore, Ray said. It's war. They had 3 days. And time was running out. Chapter 5. The second Brittany showed Ray the text, his entire world narrowed to a single point of focus.
Garrett.
Darius. Conspiracy. Assassination. His body went still, not calm but the kind of stillness that comes right before violence. Before blood. Before the wolf inside him rips free and destroys everything in its path. Brittany watched his eyes shift from amber to molten gold, watched his hands curl into fists so tight his knuckles went white. Ray, she said carefully, we need to call everyone.
Now. His voice was flat.
Emotionless. The tone he used when he was one breath away from losing control. Brittany pulled out her phone with shaking hands and sent a group text to Callum, Ivy, and Malik. Ray's office. Emergency.
Now.
They arrived within minutes. Callum still pulling on his shirt, Ivy barefoot with her hair in a messy bun, Malik fully dressed like he'd been awake and waiting for disaster. Ray didn't waste time with explanations. Just turn his laptop around so they could see the screen. He'd pulled up everything. Security footage from the past 6 weeks showing Garrett meeting with unfamiliar wolves in neutral territories. Financial records tracking suspicious transfers between Garrett's accounts and offshore holdings tied to Darius's pack. Text messages recovered from a burner phone one of Malik's contacts had intercepted. The evidence was damning. Garrett and Darius had been planning this for months. They're working together, Ray said, voice like gravel scraping over concrete. Garrett challenges me legally. Makes it look legitimate. Darius shows up with his wolves as moral support or some bullshit excuse. And when I'm weakened from the fight, they finish you off, Malik finished, jaw tight. Ivy cursed in Vietnamese, a rapid-fire stream of words that didn't need translation to understand their meaning. Callum slammed his fist on the desk hard enough to make the laptop jump. That cowardly son of a bitch. He can't beat you in a fair fight, so he's bringing backup. It's not about fairness, Brittany said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. It's about power. Garrett doesn't care how he wins. He just wants the pack. And Darius wants Ray dead, so he can come after me without resistance. The room went cold. Ray's eyes blazed. He's not getting anywhere near you. I know, Brittany said. Because we're not going to give them the chance. Everyone stared at her. What are you talking about? Ray asked. Brittany straightened her shoulders, mind racing 3 steps ahead, connecting dots, building a strategy that felt insane and brilliant and terrifying all at once. They think I'm your weakness. A latent wolf playing dress-up as your mate. Someone who makes you vulnerable, distracted, emotional. She looked Ray dead in the eye. So, let's use that. Brittany laid it out fast, words tumbling over each other in her urgency to make them understand. They'd let Garrett think he had the upper hand. Let him believe Ray was too distracted by love, too soft, too compromised to fight effectively. Let Darius assume the same, that Brittany was a liability, a pretty face with no real power. Meanwhile, Brittany would do what neither Garrett nor Darius expected. She'd build an alliance. Not through threats or dominance or the kind of brutal politics that alphas like Garrett thrived on. Through loyalty. Through solidarity. Through reaching out to every small pack in the region that had been screwed over, pushed aside, underestimated by the big players. The outcasts. The underdogs. The wolves everyone else had written off. We build our own network, Brittany said, voice gaining strength as the plan solidified in her mind. Not through fear or power. Through trust. Through showing them that standing together is stronger than standing alone. Ray stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're talking about going against two alphas and their entire networks, he said slowly. With packs that barely have resources to survive on their own. I'm talking about protecting our family, Brittany corrected. Our pack. The people in this room who would die for each other without hesitation. Callum's grin was sharp and fierce.
Damn.
I like her. Ivy nodded, eyes bright. Let's do it. Malik's expression didn't change, but something in his gaze softened. Approval. Respect. It could work. If we move fast. Ray reached out and cupped Brittany's face. You're not latent, Brittany. You're the strongest wolf I've ever met. Her throat tightened. Then let's prove it. Over the next 72 hours, Brittany barely slept. She moved through the region like wildfire, burning through every contact Callum had built over the years, every connection Malik's intelligence network had mapped, every small pack that had been pushed to the margins by alphas like Garrett and Darius. The first stop was Ember Ridge Pack, a small territory east of Portland, led by Kenna Brooks. 5'4", built like a fighter, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. When Brittany arrived, Kenna met her at the border. Phoenix Pack. Ray Coleman's new mate. I heard about the premiere. Nice dress. I'm not here to waste your time, Brittany said. Garrett Coleman and Darius Cross are planning to kill Ray and take over Phoenix Pack. After that, they'll come for every small pack, including yours. Kenna studied her, then smiled. I'm in. The second stop was Riverbend Pack. Family run. Darius had tried to absorb them by force 3 years ago. When Brittany explained everything, Tobias Chun didn't hesitate. We're with you. The third stop was North Point Pack. Young. Leaderless. Barely surviving. Brittany told them the truth. You can keep surviving alone. Or you can stand with us and choose your family. Zoe Tren nodded. We're in. By the end of the third day, Brittany had commitments from 12 packs. Together, they were a force. Ray pulled her into his arms when she returned. You did it. They had an army. Now, they just had to survive long enough to use it. That night, Ray paced like a caged animal. Garrett was brutal. Darius was ruthless. Ray could die tomorrow. He found Brittany packing emergency supplies. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. If something happens to you because of me, then don't let it. I love you, he whispered. I love you too. Tomorrow they'd fight. Together. Dawn broke cold and gray. Garrett arrived first. 30 wolves. Then Darius. 40 more. And then the allies emerged from the trees. 12 packs. Together. Garrett's smile faltered. Darius reassessed. Ray's voice carried across the clearing. This is what happens when you underestimate the outcasts. The challenge had begun. Chapter 6. The rules were ancient, carved into werewolf law centuries ago, when challenges were the only way to settle disputes between alphas. 2 wolves enter. 1 walks away as alpha. No weapons.
No interference.
Fight until submission or death. The regional council stood at the edge of the clearing, 3 stern-faced elders in traditional ceremonial robes, witnessing and validating whatever bloodshed was about to unfold. Ray stood in the center of the circle, jaw set, eyes glowing molten gold. He stripped off his shirt slowly, deliberately, revealing the tattoos that covered his chest and arms. Wolf imagery, pack symbols, scars turned into art. Muscles coiled beneath his skin, tension radiating off him in waves. Garrett stood across from him, smiling, confident, like this was already over. Last chance to step down, nephew, Garrett called out. Save yourself the humiliation. Ray didn't respond, just held his uncle's gaze with lethal focus. The head counselor raised his hand. The challenge begins now. Garrett shifted first. The transformation was brutal, violent, bones cracking, muscles tearing and reforming, fur erupting across his skin in a wave of gray and silver. His wolf was massive, easily 300 pounds of scar-covered predator with eyes like chips of ice and teeth designed to tear through flesh. He'd been fighting for 30 years, had killed challengers before, had the scars to prove it. Ray's shift was faster. One moment he was human, the next he was wolf. Pure black fur, bigger than Garrett by at least 50 pounds. Eyes blazing amber gold, teeth bared in a snarl that made the ground beneath Brittany's feet vibrate. And then they collided. The sound was like thunder, bodies crashing together with enough force to shake the trees. Claws raked, teeth snapped, blood sprayed across the dirt in arcs of crimson. Garrett went for Ray's throat immediately, using his experience to try to end the fight fast. But Ray was younger, faster. He twisted out of reach, spun, and slammed into Garrett's side hard enough to send the older wolf stumbling. The crowd watching from the sidelines erupted into shouts and gasps. Brittany couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. Her hands were clenched into fists, so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Callum stood beside her, hand gripping her shoulder like an anchor. "He's got this," he said, voice tight. But Brittany could feel Ray through the bond. Could feel the pain lancing through his body every time Garrett landed a hit. Could feel his determination, his fury, his absolute refusal to lose. Garrett fought like a wolf who had nothing left to lose. He was older, more experienced. He knew every dirty trick, every vulnerability, every way to exploit an opponent's weaknesses. When Ray lunged, Garrett sidestepped and raked claws across Ray's ribs, opening 3 deep gashes that bled freely. When Ray tried to go for Garrett's legs, Garrett slammed him into the ground hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. The fight was brutal, visceral, blood soaked into the dirt, turning the clearing into a battlefield. But Ray fought like a wolf with everything to lose. He fought for his pack, for the family he'd built from nothing, for the outcasts and misfits who'd trusted him to keep them safe. He fought for Brittany. Every time Garrett landed a blow, Ray surged back harder, faster, more relentless. Claws tore through fur and flesh. Teeth snapped inches from jugulars. The two wolves circled each other, panting, bleeding, neither willing to submit. And then Garrett saw his opening. Ray overextended on a lunge, momentum carrying him too far forward. Garrett twisted, jaws clamping down on Ray's shoulder with bone-crushing force. Ray howled, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the clearing and tore through Brittany's chest like a knife. Garrett dragged Ray down, teeth sinking deeper, blood pouring from the wound. The crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled through the assembled packs. Darius, watching from the sidelines with his 40 wolves, smiled. Cold. Victorious. Brittany's vision tunneled. Her wolf roared inside her. Not a whisper, not a suggestion, but a full-throated scream of rage and desperation. Not happening. Brittany didn't remember moving. 1 second she was standing beside Callum, frozen in horror. The next, she was at the edge of the challenge circle, hands outstretched, golden light blazing from her palms. "Brittany, no!" Ivy screamed from somewhere behind her. "You'll void the challenge." But Brittany wasn't listening. She wasn't healing Ray, not directly. That would break the rules, invalidate the fight, hand Garrett the victory. Instead, she did something she didn't know was possible. She channeled strength into him, through the bond. The mating mark on her neck burned like fire. The connection between them flared so bright it felt like the sun had descended into the clearing. Golden light poured from Brittany's hands, through the bond, directly into Ray's wolf. He felt it immediately. The exhaustion lifted. The pain receded. Energy flooded his limbs like lightning in his veins. Ray's eyes snapped to Brittany across the clearing, amber meeting gold, wolf recognizing mate, bond blazing brighter than anything either of them had ever felt. And then he surged. With a snarl that shook the trees, Ray ripped free from Garrett's hold, twisted,
Swoon.
and went straight for his uncle's throat. Garrett didn't have time to react. Ray's jaws locked around his throat, not killing, not yet, but dominating.
Holding.
Waiting for submission. Garrett thrashed, struggled, claws raking across Ray's sides in desperation. But Ray held on. Seconds stretched into eternity. And then, finally, Garrett went limp. His wolf form shuddered, then shifted back to human, gasping and bleeding in the dirt. "I submit," Garrett rasped, voice barely audible. "I submit." Ray released him and shifted back to human form, chest heaving, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. The clearing erupted into chaos. Cheers from the allied packs. Stunned silence from Garrett's wolves. The council conferring in hushed, urgent tones. Ray stood over his uncle, eyes still glowing amber, voice like gravel. "It's over." Garrett didn't respond. Just lay there, broken and defeated. The fight was over. Ray had won. But Darius Cross wasn't done. The second Ray turned away from Garrett, exhausted and bleeding, Darius stepped forward from the crowd of his wolves. His voice carried across the clearing, smooth and venomous. "You won the challenge, Coleman. Congratulations." Ray's eyes narrowed. "Walk away, Darius." "Oh, I will. But there's just one problem." Darius pointed at Brittany, smile cold and cruel. "Outside interference. Your mate channeled power into you during the fight. That's against the rules." The council murmured, heads turning toward Brittany. Brittany's stomach dropped. "Which means," Darius continued, "the challenge is void." Garrett's defeat doesn't count. The head counselor frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "The rules state no physical interference." "She used magic," Darius interrupted. "Healer magic. Through the bond. That's interference." The council hesitated, whispered among themselves. Ray took a step toward Darius, fury blazing in his eyes. "You want to challenge the ruling?
Fine.
But you don't get to." "I'm not challenging the ruling," Darius said smoothly. "I'm issuing my own challenge." The clearing went silent. Darius's smile widened. "Ray Coleman is injured, exhausted, barely standing, which makes now the perfect time for me to claim what's mine." He shifted. The transformation was fast, brutal. Rust-colored fur, massive frame, eyes like dead coals. Darius's wolf was bigger than Garrett's. Meaner, built for killing. Ray swayed on his feet, blood loss and exhaustion catching up to him. He couldn't fight again. Not like this. Not against a fresh opponent. Brittany's wolf roared. "No," she said, stepping forward. Her voice rang out across the clearing, clear and strong and absolutely final. "If you want another fight, you go through me." The clearing went deathly silent. Darius's wolf turned to look at her, and if wolves could laugh, he would have. Then Brittany shifted. She'd never fully shifted before. All her life, her wolf had been a whisper, a shadow, a presence that never quite manifested. But standing there in that clearing with Ray bleeding behind her and Darius's wolf stalking forward with murder in his eyes, her wolf didn't whisper. She roared. The shift tore through Brittany like lightning. Bones breaking and reforming, muscles stretching, fur erupting across her skin in a wave of pure silver light. Not gray, not white.
Silver.
Radiant, glowing, like moonlight given form. Brittany's wolf was smaller than Darius's, built for speed and agility rather than brute strength. But she was powerful in a way that had nothing to do with size. Healer magic pulsed from her fur in waves of golden light. The air around her shimmered with energy. The council stared, mouths open in shock. The assembled packs gasped, whispers rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Even Darius's wolf hesitated, eyes narrowing in calculation. And Ray's voice, rough, awed, filled with so much love it made Brittany's heart ache, cut through the stunned silence. "That's my mate." Darius attacked first. He was fast, brutal, going straight for Brittany's throat with killing intent. But Brittany was faster. She ducked low, twisted, and came up behind him, teeth snapping at his flank. Darius spun, claws raking across her shoulder. Blood welled, but the wound closed almost instantly, golden light pulsing from her fur as she healed herself mid-fight. Darius snarled in frustration. He couldn't win a war of endurance. Not against a healer who could patch herself up faster than he could damage her. So he changed tactics. Went for overwhelming force. Brutal, relentless attacks designed to break bones, crush organs, and the fight in one devastating blow. But Brittany was learning. She used her size to her advantage, darting in and out of reach, landing quick strikes and retreating before Darius could counter. She wasn't trying to kill him, just exhaust him, wear him down. The fight stretched on. Minutes feeling like hours, both wolves panting, bleeding, circling each other. And then Brittany saw her opening. Darius lunged, overextending in his desperation to land a finishing blow. Brittany ducked low, came up under his jaw, and latched on. Not to kill, to dominate. Her teeth sank into the soft flesh beneath his throat, holding but not tearing. Darius thrashed, snarled, claws raking across her sides in a final desperate attempt to break free. But Brittany held on. Seconds stretched. And finally, Darius went limp. His wolf form shuddered, shifted back to human, gasping and defeated in the dirt. Brittany released him and shifted back to human form, standing over him, chest heaving, blood and dirt streaked across her skin. It's over. Okay, real talk. If you've made it this far and you haven't subscribed yet, I need to know what's stopping you. We just gave you a double alpha showdown, a silver wolf transformation, and a mate bond that literally saved lives. And you're really gonna scroll away without hitting that button? Drop a comment right now and tell us what country you're watching from. Let's see how global this pack really is. And if you're loving this story, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs this kind of heat in their life. The council ruled in their favor. After an hour of deliberation, hushed arguments, and reviewing pack law precedents, the head counselor stepped forward. Ray Coleman's victory stands. Garrett Coleman is hereby exiled from the region. Darius Cross is banned from Pacific Northwest territories, and his pack will be absorbed by council oversight. The clearing erupted into cheers from the allied packs. Garrett was dragged away by council enforcers, still bleeding, still broken. Darius left without a word, 40 wolves trailing behind him in defeat. And Brittany? Brittany stood in the center of the clearing, wrapped in Ray's coat, exhausted and exhilarated and still processing what had just happened. She wasn't latent anymore. She was a silver healer wolf, one of the rarest, most powerful types in existence. Ray pulled her into his arms in front of everyone, the council, the allied packs, the witnesses who would carry this story across the region. He kissed her like the world was watching.
Because it was.
And when he pulled back, his voice was rough with emotion. You're mine. For real this time. Brittany smiled, tears streaming down her face. I was always yours. Chapter 7. 3 weeks after the challenge, the Phoenix Pack grounds looked like something out of a dream. String lights crisscrossed overhead, casting warm golden light across the compound. Wildflowers, picked from the forest by pack members who'd spent days gathering them, lined the pathways in bursts of purple, yellow, and white. A massive bonfire crackled in the center of the clearing, flames reaching toward the star-filled sky. The air smelled like cedar smoke and spring blossoms and possibility. Every allied pack had come. Kenna and her Ember Ridge wolves arrived early, helping set up tables and chairs. The Riverbend family brought enough food to feed an army. North Point's young wolves handled decorations with an enthusiasm that made Brittany's chest ache in the best way. These weren't just allies anymore. They were family. Brittany stood in Ivy's room, staring at herself in the full-length mirror, hands smoothing down the white dress she'd found in a vintage shop downtown. Simple. Elegant. No train, no veil, nothing excessive. Just soft fabric that made her feel beautiful without trying too hard. Ivy stood behind her, adjusting the silver clips holding Brittany's hair back. "You look perfect." "I'm terrified," Brittany admitted. "Of what?" "Ray. Of how much this matters." Brittany's voice shook. 3 months ago, this was supposed to be fake. Temporary. A business arrangement. Ivy met her eyes in the mirror, expression soft. And now it's everything. Ivy squeezed her shoulders. "Then go claim it." The ceremony took place under the open sky, surrounded by pack members and allies and the people who'd become Brittany's chosen family. Ray stood at the front, wearing all black, dress shirt, slacks, no tie because he'd never been that formal and wasn't about to start now. His tattoos peeked out from beneath his rolled-up sleeves. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd run his hands through it a dozen times out of nerves. When Brittany walked toward him, his breath caught audibly. Callum, standing beside Ray as best man, grinned and elbowed him.
Beate man.
Ray didn't respond, just stared at Brittany like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The elder officiating, a respected wolf from the regional council who'd agreed to perform the ceremony, cleared his throat and began. "We gather tonight to witness the joining of two souls, two wolves, two lives made whole through choice and commitment." The words were traditional, ceremonial, spoken at mating ceremonies for generations. But when the elder turned to Ray and asked, "Do you accept this bond? Do you claim Brittany Hale as your mate, your partner, your equal?" Ray didn't wait for the rest of the speech. "She's my mate, my partner, my equal." His voice carried across the clearing, strong and certain, and filled with so much emotion it made Brittany's eyes burn. "And I will spend every day of my life proving she made the right choice." The crowd erupted into cheers and whistles. Brittany laughed through tears, heart so full it felt like it might burst. "That's a yes, by the way." The elder smiled, clearly charmed despite the break in protocol. "And you, Brittany Hale? Do you accept this bond?" Brittany looked at Ray. At the man who'd given her a home when she had nowhere to go, who'd fought beside her, who'd taught her she was strong enough to stand on her own and brave enough to let someone in.
Ida.
"I accept. I choose him." Ray closed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in both hands. "Again," he murmured, voice rough. "For real this time." And then he bit her. Not the desperate, uncertain bite from 3 months ago. This one was deliberate, claiming. A promise carved into her skin. Brittany bit him back without hesitation, teeth sinking into the curve of his shoulder, marking him as hers just as completely. The bond flared between them, brighter, stronger, permanent. It locked into place like the final piece of a puzzle, burning through both of them until there was no separation, no doubt, no question. They were mated.
Truly.
Forever. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, the clearing erupted into celebration. Music started. Pack members swarmed forward with congratulations and hugs. The bonfire blazed higher, casting dancing shadows across the grounds. But Brittany only had eyes for Ray. He pulled her close, forehead resting against hers, hands cradling her face like she was something precious. "Mine," he whispered. "Yours," she agreed. "Always." The celebration was in full swing. Music playing, wolves dancing around the bonfire, laughter echoing through the compound. When the mood shifted, Brittany felt it before she saw it. A ripple of tension moving through the crowd like a cold wind. The music stopped abruptly. Conversations died mid-sentence. And then Brittany saw him. Alpha Vincent Hale stood at the edge of the compound, flanked by 2 of his enforcers. His expression was cold, calculating, every inch the powerful alpha who ruled through intimidation and control. Brittany's stomach dropped. Ray moved in front of her instantly, body coiled, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. "You're not welcome here." Vincent's eyes flicked to Ray dismissively before landing on Brittany. "I'm here for my daughter." The words sent ice through Brittany's veins. But she didn't freeze, didn't shrink back. Instead, she stepped around Ray, ignoring his low warning growl, and walked toward her father with her chin high and shoulders back. I've got this, she said quietly. Ray's hand caught her wrist for a moment, gentle, questioning. Are you sure? Brittany squeezed his hand once, then let go. She crossed the clearing until she stood directly in front of her father, close enough to see the fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. You told me I was worthless, Brittany said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That I was broken. A disappointment. You spent my entire life making me feel like I was nothing. Vincent's lip curled. You were latent. I'm a silver healer. Brittany cut him off, voice rising. One of the rarest, most powerful types of wolf in existence. And you were too blind and too arrogant to see it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Pack members watched with bated breath. Vincent's face darkened. You're still my daughter. Still under my authority. No, Brittany said firmly. I'm not. I'm not your bargaining chip. I'm not your property. I'm not a tool you can use to secure alliances or save your reputation. She took a step closer, fury burning in her chest. You tried to sell me to Darius Cross, a monster who hurt and killed his previous mates, and you didn't care. You didn't care that I was terrified. You didn't care that he would have destroyed me. All you cared about was what you could gain from the arrangement. Vincent's jaw clenched. I was doing what was best for the pack. You were doing what was best for you, Brittany corrected. And I'm done. I'm done apologizing for being myself. I'm done shrinking to fit into your idea of what I should be. And I'm done pretending you have any power over me. Silence stretched across the clearing, thick and heavy. Vincent stepped forward, fury twisting his features. You ungrateful. Ray's hand landed on Vincent's chest. Not aggressive. Not violent. Just immovable. She said no. The two alphas stared at each other, dominance crackling in the air between them. But Vincent wasn't stupid. He was outnumbered, outmatched, standing in enemy territory surrounded by wolves who would tear him apart if Ray gave the word. He looked between Brittany and Ray, expression twisting with impotent rage. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his enforcers trailing behind him. The second he disappeared into the trees, Brittany's knees nearly gave out. Ray was there instantly, arms wrapping around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder, holding her together. Proud of you, he murmured against her hair. Brittany exhaled shakily, leaning back into his warmth. That was terrifying. You are incredible. The pack erupted into cheers and applause, the tension breaking like a snapped wire. Someone restarted the music. Conversations resumed. The celebration continued. But Brittany stayed in Ray's arms for a long moment, grounding herself in his presence, in the certainty that she'd made the right choice. She was free. Hours later, after the guests had filtered out and the pack had gone to bed and the bonfire had burned down to glowing embers, Brittany and Ray sat together on the ground, backs against a log, shoulders touching. The night air was cool and crisp. Stars blazed overhead in a sky so clear it felt like they could reach up and touch them. Brittany leaned into Ray's side, exhaustion settling into her bones in the best possible way. You know what's crazy, she said softly. Ray's arm tightened around her shoulders. What? 3 months ago, I thought I'd be stuck in a fake relationship, counting down the days until I could leave. Ray smiled, a real, soft smile that transformed his entire face. And now I can't imagine my life without you. He pressed a kiss to her temple, slow and tender.
Good.
Because you're not getting rid of me. Even when I'm annoying? Especially then. Brittany laughed, the sound light and genuine. I'm pretty annoying sometimes. I know, Ray said, completely serious. You argue with everything I say. You throw things at my head when you're mad. You reorganized my entire office without asking. You needed it organized. You alphabetized my files by pack name instead of by threat level. That makes more sense. Ray laughed, deep and rich and unguarded.
See?
Annoying. Brittany elbowed him gently. You love it. I love you, Ray corrected, voice going soft. Serious. All of it. The arguments. The reorganizing. The way you throw things at my head because you know I'll catch them. Brittany turned to look at him, heart swelling. I love you too. Even when you're brooding and impossible and refuse to ask for help. I don't brood. You absolutely brood. Ray kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling, he rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For choosing me. For staying. For making me believe I deserve this. Brittany's eyes burned. You've always deserved it. They sat in comfortable silence after that, wrapped in each other and the quiet night and the knowledge that they'd fought for this, for each other, for their pack, for the life they were building together. And as the last embers of the bonfire faded to ash and the stars wheeled overhead, Brittany felt something she hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
She was home. Chapter 8. 6 months after I stood in that clearing and watched my father walk away for the last time, life had transformed into something I didn't know was possible. The Phoenix Pack compound buzzed with constant activity now. Where there used to be 30 wolves moving through empty spaces with careful distance, there were now alliances, partnerships, connections that spanned across 5 territories. The monthly gatherings Ray and I hosted brought together wolves from Ember Ridge, Riverbend, North Point, and 9 other small packs that had been pushed to the margins for too long. We shared resources, medical supplies, training protocols, intelligence on rogue movements. We trained together in the clearing where I'd fought Darius, turning that blood-soaked ground into something that represented strength through unity instead of survival through violence. I ran the healing clinic now. A real clinic with proper equipment, trained staff, and a reputation that brought wolves from hundreds of miles away seeking treatment they couldn't get anywhere else. Ivy was my partner in everything, teaching me advanced techniques, while I discovered new applications for silver healer magic that hadn't been documented in centuries. Kenna from Ember Ridge became one of my closest friends, showing up unannounced on Thursday nights with wine and stories that made me laugh until my sides hurt. Callum never stopped making jokes about how Ray had gone soft, though anyone with eyes could see Ray was exactly the same. He just smiled more now. Laughed easier. Let his guard down in ways that would have been impossible 6 months ago. I trained with my wolf every single day. Dawn runs through the forest, where I pushed my speed until my lungs burned and my legs trembled. Combat practice with Malik, who never went easy on me and never acted like my silver fur made me fragile. I learned to shift faster, 3 seconds now instead of the agonizing minute it took that first time in the challenge circle. Learned to fight smarter, using my size and speed to my advantage instead of trying to match the brute strength of larger wolves. Learned to heal stronger, channeling energy through the bond with precision that let me mend broken bones in minutes instead of hours. The real discovery came 3 months after the mating ceremony. I'd been working with Ivy on a patient who'd taken a claw to the chest during border patrol, deep enough to be serious, but not immediately life-threatening. Ivy was preparing to stitch the wound when my wolf surged forward with an instinct I didn't understand yet. I placed my hands over the injury, and instead of healing energy, a shield manifested. Golden light solidified into a barrier that covered the wound, protecting it from infection and external damage while accelerating the body's natural healing process from within. Ivy had stared at me with her mouth hanging open. Silver healers can shield. I've read about it but never seen it done. Now I could project protective barriers around others in battle. Could shield an entire group of wolves from attacks. Could create safe zones in the middle of chaos where injured pack members could recover without being vulnerable. I wasn't a liability anymore. Wasn't the latent wolf people pitted or dismissed. I was a weapon. A protector. A leader who stood beside Ray at pack meetings and council gatherings with my head high and my voice steady. And Ray never let me forget it. Every morning when I stumbled into the kitchen still half asleep, there was coffee waiting exactly how I liked it. Every time I doubted myself, he was there with quiet words that cut through the noise in my head. Every time I succeeded at something new, his pride blazed through the bond so fierce it took my breath away. Ray was different too. The walls he'd spent 30 years building had come down brick by brick, revealing the person underneath. Someone who laughed at Callum's terrible jokes, who sat with young wolves struggling with their first shifts and talked them through the fear, who held me in the middle of the night when my own nightmares crept in and whispered that I wasn't strong enough for this life. He still had nightmares about his father sometimes. I'd wake to find him sitting on the edge of our bed, shoulders hunched, breathing harsh and uneven like he'd been running from something that only existed in his mind. Those nights, I didn't ask questions. Just wrapped myself around him and held on until his breathing evened out and the tension drained from his body. One night, 3 months into our mating, he woke up gasping. His hands were trembling when I caught them in mine. "I used to think I'd end up like him," Ray whispered into the dark. His voice was raw, stripped of every defense. "That one day I'd snap and become the same monster who—" "You won't." I cut him off firmly, pulling him down so his head rested against my chest where he could hear my heartbeat. "You're nothing like him. You protect instead of destroy. You love instead of terrorize. You lead with honor instead of fear." His arms tightened around me. "I love you. I love you too." The words came easier every time I said them. "And I'm not going anywhere." The nightmares came less frequently after that. The smiles came more often. 6 months after the mating ceremony, we got invited to another movie premiere. Same venue. Same red carpet. Same photographers who'd shouted at me to turn around and show them more. But this time, everything was different. I wore red. A dress that hugged every curve and made me feel powerful in a way that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. My hair fell loose down my back, silver clips catching the light. The mating mark on my neck was visible, and I didn't care who saw it. Ray walked beside me with his hand on my lower back, dressed in all black, eyes never leaving me even when voices called his name from the crowd. The cameras flashed. Voices shouted. But this time I didn't freeze. Didn't feel exposed or vulnerable or like I needed someone to save me. I was Luna of the Phoenix Pack, Ray Coleman's mate, a silver healer who'd fought an alpha twice her size and won. A woman who'd walked away from her father's control and built a family from wolves who chose each other instead of being bound by blood. A photographer near the front shouted above the chaos, "Brittany, how does it feel to be Luna of the Phoenix Pack?" I smiled, genuine, radiant, completely unguarded, and leaned into Ray's side. His arm came around me immediately, solid and warm and permanent. "It feels like coming home." Ray kissed me right there in front of all the cameras. Didn't care about the optics or the politics or what anyone thought. Just kissed me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered to him. Because I was. And when we finally pulled apart, both smiling, the bond between us blazed brighter than any spotlight. I wasn't a secret anymore. Wasn't something to be hidden or protected or kept away from prying eyes. I was his mate, his Luna, his forever. And nothing in this world could change that. They say werewolves mate for life. That the bond is unbreakable, eternal, fierce. And yeah, they're right about that. But what they don't tell you is this: the best love stories aren't the ones written by fate. They're not predetermined by some cosmic force that decides who you're meant to be with before you ever have a choice in the matter. The best love stories are the ones you choose. Every single day. Even when it's hard. Even when it's terrifying. Even when every instinct screams at you to run because vulnerability feels like weakness and opening your heart feels like handing someone a weapon they could use to destroy you. Ray chose me when I was nobody. When I was broken and running, and convinced I'd never be worth loving. I chose him when he was dangerous and damaged, and convinced he'd never deserve to be loved. And together, we built something stronger than destiny. Something more powerful than any bond fate could have forced on us. We built a family, a pack, a home where wolves who didn't fit anywhere else finally belonged. And that was worth every terrifying step it took to get here.
And that's the story.
If you made it all the way to the end, thank you.
Seriously.
It means everything to us here at Gracie Werewolf Story Bank. If you loved Brittany and Ray's journey, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We read every single one. Got a favorite moment? A scene that made you cry or scream or throw your phone across the room? Let us know below. And if you want more stories like this, strong heroines, swoon-worthy alphas, enemies to lovers' heat, and happily ever afters that hit different, stick around. We've got so much more coming your way. Until next time, stay wild, stay loyal, and remember, you're not broken. You're just becoming.